Welcome, everybody. This is the live stream for July 8th, 2021. My name is Justin Deschamps. I'm the founder of Stillness in the Storm and writer, producer, researcher, and all-around workhorse for Into the Storm and Edge of Wonder.tv, soon to be Rise.tv, I believe. So I've got an awesome show for you today. Lots of stuff to talk about, as usual. We're going to be getting into some really cool topics. And I have spent probably the past, I don't know, I've sunk at least 6 hours into going through Bill Cosby related material. So there's a lot of interesting things I've found with that. I knew that there was more to the story than the mainstream media was sharing, and I was not disappointed by what I found. So lots of good stuff. Today we're going to be covering big tech censorship of Stillness in the Storm. We've got a bunch of inspiring videos for you. I have a clip from Tucker, which is pretty glaring. Some people think that he's admitting some things in there covertly, and I'll leave it up to you, but we'll talk about the implications. We have Stacy Abrams, and her shenanigans, particularly related to her deaths. So we're going to be talking about that and how they mysteriously disappeared recently. The Cabal is holding a Bilderberg-Style secret meeting this week. As I mentioned, there's the truth about Bill Cosby. Apparently, fireworks are racist now. We'll get into some of that. Trump pulls out the big guns this week. Yeah, major moves with Trump. A few other stories I'll try to sprinkle in there. That's all. What I just covered that's all for the free version that you're seeing right now on YouTube, and of course in the Zoom room. And then after about a halfway point, we're going to go to the private version, where we're going to cover the things I can't talk about on YouTube, or they're going to censor me, and we don't want that. So there's some really interesting messages, I think, in the calendar that Trump put out. I believe it was actually Melania who curated the calendar. It was the Trump 2021 calendar. I have all of those images that I'm going to show for you today on the private side. So be sure to go to Subscribestar, which you can find in the link in the description of this live stream, and sign up for as little as $3 a month. You can have access to this full stream, ask me questions, be in the chat room, all sorts of great stuff. And obviously that's a way to contribute and support our work. We're doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes. We'll just put it that way. Mike Lindell is has some interesting things to say about Trump coming back to the White House. So we're going to get into that a little bit and analyze some of that. I know that's been a hot button issue for a lot of people. So we're going to get into, trying to figure out what that is. And we have COVID vax news, of course. We have a really deplorable story. I actually have two in this category, but I don't know if we're going to have time to get to the second one. But there was a Washington Post reporter that was basically saying she thinks kinky sex and, the LGBTQ, let freedom reign kind of thought process of just letting kids be exposed to all manner of debauchery, to put it simply, is a good thing. And we're going to break down what's going on with that and why it isn't necessarily a good thing. And if I have time, I wanted to get into some of the deeper psychology of how sexuality actually emerges, because there's a lot of confusion out there on both sides of the spectrum, but definitely the left, I would say, is, as far as the damage that is being inflicted onto children, the left, the radical left, I should say, is contributing probably more than anybody else right now. Although the traditional right, we might say, has done their fair share of destruction in this world, undoubtedly. We're going to get into a really interesting image I saw with Laurance, Rockefeller, John Podesta, and Chester Bennington. And this is all, again, for the Zoom only. So if you're interested in these deeper dive topics where I get to talk about stuff without worrying about being censored by YouTube, go to the description, go to Subscribestar, sign up for $3 a month or more. All the money you provide helps us and contributes to the work we're doing. And we've got a lot of big things we're working on. And lastly, we're going to get into a discussion about the Urantia book. Last week, we did a very brief overview of the foreword for the Urantia book, which is pretty sizable and not for the faint at heart. And so we're going to cover a little bit of the first paper of the Universal Fathers. We're going to get into what does the Urantia book actually say about God? Who is God? What is our relationship to God? How does the concept of God evolve across time? How does that affect our lives and affect the evolution of a civilization and a planet? It's like major topics. You know, we're going to get into that a little bit today. I'm also going to answer some questions that I receive pretty frequently. I received some questions about the Urantia book recently, and it occurred to me that kind of giving a Q&A about the Urantia book, especially some of the more controversial components of the Urantia book, would probably be really informative and educational, infotainment, as they say. So yeah, lots of stuff that we want to cover. So before we get into all of those wonderful things, if you have a question for me and you want me to answer it, just go ahead and pop it into the Zoom room. If you're in Zoom, I will see it and I'll respond to it. And also, if you have a question on YouTube, you can pop it in the chat. I try to get in there and take a look and see. But part of the reason that I have the paid version is because I want people to go and ask me questions through Zoom. And I'm not asking for a lot. You know, somebody recently said that, like, oh, I can't believe you're asking people to pay money for this. Well, you know, the bottom line is there's no free lunches anywhere. I mean, I don't think it's really beyond reproach to mention that truth, that nothing really is for free. Now, I give a lot of my time and energy to this because I think it's very important, but merely asking for people to want to give back is not anything criminal or malicious, and it actually enables me to do more. You know, if we lived in a world where we all just recognized how much energy is being put forward into the things people are doing, I have a genuine sense of appreciation and gratitude, we probably want to give to them. And I think that's what the true Christian concept, or general, you know, it's not necessarily Christian, but the concept in religiosity, we will say, of giving is that, you know, there's a genuine intrinsic, you want to give for your own personal reasons and because it's satisfying to you, not because you feel obligated. And that's really the spirit that I want to invoke for these things. You know, if I didn't want to just give the information out there for free, I wouldn't. And, you know, a lot of the reason why I have the Zoom only version of these live streams is so I could talk to you guys about things I can't talk about on YouTube definitively. So it's a multi-spectrum, you know, project. And I appreciate everybody. I thank everybody who has contributed thus far. We got some really awesome contributors on Subscribestar. If they weren't sending the funds, then, you know, a big piece of what Stillness in the Storm is and the work that we do just wouldn't exist. And so yeah, so go ahead and check that out. Now, I also want to say I have recently started working with a scriptwriter for who's been working with Stillness in the Storm for some time. He and I have been trying to calibrate a lot of our work that we do because, you know, just to give you kind of a look behind the scenes here, the amount of energy that it takes to put into a single video, like a 10-minute video or some of the more longer form ones, takes a long time. I mean, you have to find a topic, you have to research the heck out of it. If you're doing a complete job, which I want to do, I want to make sure if I'm going to say something, I've really checked to make sure that what I'm saying is actually what I'm saying. And if there's any uncertainty there, that I clearly speak to that, because, you know, my big thing, my principle, the thing I'm passionate about is I want to give you the truth. I want to give you key knowledge and information, as I like to call it, so you can be better informed, so that we can work together as a people to make this world a better place, improve our lives, improve our communities, improve the planet for ourselves and posterity. So there's a lot of time and energy that goes into the whole script writing process and figuring out how to deliver the information, what not to cover, what to cover, all that. So I'm working with a script writer right now. If it wasn't for the contributions from Stillness in the Storm, you know, fans, supporters, etc., we couldn't do this project. So there's a lot of things, like I say, you know, I mention a lot. There's a lot of stuff in development. You guys are probably like, yeah, whatever, dude. You always say that. Well, I'm not kidding. There is a ton of stuff in development, but it's little inches forward because there's only so much time and energy I have. But now that there's more of an energy stream coming, there's lots of good stuff. So we're going to be having probably our first collaborative video. If I can get into the editing room here, that'll probably be debuting sometime next week. So go ahead and check that out. It's going to be about, where is it? We got like several different scripts running right now. So I'll pull it up real quick. just to give you an overview of what it will be about. And this one is going to be about, where did I put that? One second, apologies for this. This is a situation where I'd like to have everything prepared, but there's things you just think of and you're like, I don't know if I'll need this. Well, come to find out you do need it. So it's going to be about fake fact checkers. We hear about these fact checkers all the time. Who are these people? Are they really fact checking anything? Can we trust them? What's the agenda behind them? How does some of the psychology work? How do you really fact check anything? All of those topics we're going to discuss in this video that's going to be released next week. I think it's one of the best ones about this topic that I've come across. Obviously I'm biased, but I think you guys would be really interested in it. So look out for that next week on the Stillness in the Storm Rumble. I don't think I'm going to be able to release it on YouTube. I'll probably get censored. So that goes to show you what's in there. All right, so let's go ahead and launch into our subject matter for today. We've got a ton to cover. So for those of you who don't know, Stillness in the Storm has a newsletter. If you go to stillnessinthestorm.com and you look on the right-hand side, you'll see the ability to sign up for a newsletter. In the newsletter, what happens is called an RSS feed newsletter. It takes all of the posts that have been done across some period of time, 24 hours, and it puts them in a single email and it sends them out to everybody. It's a pretty standard thing. Well, we've been censored like all over the place. Facebook has completely censored us. If you take a Stillness in the Storm article and you try to post it on Facebook, you're going to get a message to the effect of the link you tried to post contains this information, hate speech, misleading information, misleading medical information, you name it, all these terms that are flying around, and Facebook can't let you post it. So sharing the newsletter has become an important way to bypass the censorship. And I often say that the fact that there's so much censorship happening is a pretty good indication that at the very least we're putting out information that's probably damaging to the deep state agenda. And I'd like to think that there's a good chunk of truth in there too. And I think there is. So what's happened recently is a subscriber emailed me to tell me that what they do is every time they receive a newsletter, they forward that newsletter to about 20 different people and their friends, family, et cetera, that they think want to know the information. And there's a lot of less than tech savvy people out there, we'll say, that don't know how to use computers as efficiently as somebody like me or some of the newer generations. I mean, that's a pretty standard truism right there. So if it wasn't for people who know a little bit more than other people sharing the information, it probably wouldn't get out. And there's a lot of people who rely on that. Well, some of the big email providers like Gmail, Hotmail, Yahoo, and what's the other one? I think it was MSN. They prevented
some of the big
reader from
like Gmail.
1 second. I got somebody.
Hotmail.
Just make sure if you come into the room, just keep yourself muted. Thanks for that. Okay. So they were unable to forward the email. And the reason why is because the email provider said that the content contained spam. Now, I can tell you, obviously, the content doesn't contain spam. If you were receiving the Stillness in the Storm newsletter, it's because you wanted it. You signed up. I have what's called an opt-in process. It's a double opt-in process. So it's the process that ensures, from a legal and consent, so lawful perspective, when you say you want the email, you're going to get the email. And if you don't want it, I'm not going to send it to you. So there's no spam. But what has emerged is that now email providers are so terrified, big tech, mind you, is so terrified of information that's counter-narrative that they're suppressing even emails from getting to people. So if you've experienced this before, I'd love to hear about it. If it wasn't for readers telling me what they experience with these things, I just wouldn't know. So obviously there's a lot I do know about what affects Stillness in the Storm and the ability for people to gain access to the information, but I don't know everything. And there's a lot I pick up from the readers, from people like you who read Stillness in the Storm, watch the videos, go to the site regularly, and tell me about all the crazy things that they experience just trying to share the information. So how do you deal with something like this? Well, there are methods to deal with it. The method is that I would suggest copying some of the articles you want to share instead of just forwarding it, and put that in a new email. And you can put like the headline and then the link underneath, something like that, or any way you think, as long as it's in there so people can have it. And you can get some of the information across that way. Another way to do it is to, in your newsletter, as a matter of fact, maybe I can pull up a version that I can show you here. Hold on one second. But in the newsletter, there is a button I wanted to show you guys that you can use to access it. Okay. So let's see. I'm going to share my screen with you guys so you can see what I'm looking at. So here's the newsletter. Now, if you see this button right here, it says View in Browser. When you click on this, it's actually going to bring you to essentially a page on MailerLite. MailerLite is the service that we use on Stillness in the Storm. It's the one that we had to use because MailChimp is the service we used to have, and they completely disabled our account. Not only that, they actually took our payment like the day after we send the payment. It just goes to show you how shady and desperate these people are, these big tech, oligarchs. They took my measly $150 payment, and then they canceled the service right afterwards. So it's like, are they that desperate for money that they're bilking me for my $150 and then canceling my service right then and there with like only 24 hours to pull my information out? I guess I should be thankful that they gave me any opportunity to pull information out, but there you have it. So now that you see this email here, you can click on View in Browser. When you click on View in Browser, you get a link to a page. This is a standalone page. It's hosted on MailerLite. And so the short version, without getting into the technical details, is that you can take that link, you can pop it directly into an email, forward it to whoever you want. Because it's a link, it most likely will not get flagged, and the person can have access to literally the entire email with all of the various articles that people know and love. So just wanted to throw that out there. And while I'm here, actually, I know I get this message a lot from people too. They're like, hey, there's no way to unsubscribe from your newsletter. Well, there is. It's at the very bottom of almost all of the news services that use newsletters have this feature. At the very bottom, there's a button that says unsubscribe. You just click on that, which I won't do here, but you click on that, it'll unsubscribe you or take you through a series of prompts that you will, upon completion, have successfully unsubscribed. So that's that. So pretty crazy. Again, if you have experienced something like this and you want to let me know, would love to know, you can email me. It's justin.deschamps@stillnessinthestorm.com or info@stillnessinthestorm.com. That'll also get to me. Or you can pop it into the chat or let me know any other way that you might happen to want to let me know. Again, it really helps. Okay, so let's move on to another story. But before I get there, I want to take you guys, remind you to go to stillnessinthestore.com. So it's just like Stillness in the Storm, except the M becomes an E, Stillness in the Store. And if you go to Stillness in the Storm, I'll show you, you will see a link that says Store. So this is Stillness in the Storm. This is the news site, obviously. You click on Store, you're going to go to the store site. So this is the store we just launched. There's all sorts of really cool products. We're having lots of fun with this. Lots of merch you can get. We're partnered with Red Pill Living, so he's got all sorts of really great products. Collagen Complex, the Sleepy Joe, which is one of the hottest sellers. So obviously it's a sleeping supplement designed to kind of poke fun at Joe Biden. All of these designs are ones that I made, with the exception of like 2, but I don't actually think they're on here yet. And the reason why I designed this, I think it's important to tell the story a little bit. I wanted, everybody's had to deal with the fact that they're buying products made by, let's face it, a lot of our clothing is made by what's effectively slave labor. We're wearing, Nike, Adidas, all these various designers, and because those brand logos are all over us, we're advertising for them. If you know this, but Nike is a Saturnian logo. The swish is meant to look like Saturn symbol. At least that's the belief. So why are we giving these people every opportunity to make as much money as possible off us? And now their messages are the ones that people are seeing when they look at my clothes. Well, I said, you know what? I don't want that. What I want is I want to create a clothing line that is specifically designed to share things that you think are important in your spiritual process, or your things, your beliefs, your values, the things that you believe are important, and give you a piece of clothing or merchandise that allows you to showcase that. And so part of the system is so that I want you to tell me what you think is valuable. So a lot of these designs have come from inspiration because I've had conversations with people like you who tell me, hey, I really care about, the Trinity, which is the whole, where the Father, Son, Spirit design comes from. I'll click on clothing real quick. I really care about God winning, the fact that there is a creator. The creator's plans and purposes are so far beyond what the Cabal could even imagine that there's no way in heaven that the creator could lose. So that's what God wins is all about, right here. So, that's part of the ethos and the concept behind this clothing line. And this brand is for Body for Awareness Project. So go to this site, stillnessinthestore.com, check it out. You'll find all sorts of cool stuff in there. If you have a design request, let me know. Send me an email or pop it into the chat. You can do that right down here. And you'll get, that'll send a message to me or the manager for this site, and we'll get that coming across. All right, so that being said, let's go ahead and move on to the next story. So let's get some inspiration up there first. When I saw this, I just was like so inspired by what I saw, I gotta say. So give me one moment. I'm going to share the screen. I also gotta unplug my good old headphones here. So, there's all sorts of channels on Telegram and various other places, Twitter, of course, where you find these awesome little clips of really inspiring things. And I wanted to start showcasing some of those for you because they pack a lot of power. The picture's worth 1,000 words is the thing we hear often. Well, a video in that sense must be worth like 10,000 words because there's, each frame has a picture, basically. It's kind of the general idea. So here's a really cool example of something that happened over the course of the 4th. I'll go ahead and play it, and then we'll talk a little bit about it. Oh, so inspiring. Awesome. Okay. Okay, well, there you have it. I mean, it says a lot in itself, but, I wanted to speak to something that maybe there's some people that are hesitant about patriotism. I know, especially with the whole critical race theory, Marxist leftist agenda, it's the idea that taking any pride in your national heritage is some type of dog whistle for white supremacy or some insanity like that. And usually the argument is like, well, look at some of the totalitarian regimes we've seen in history, most notably the Nazi regime. Hitler was a nationalist. He wanted to, create a strong national state that he could use to do various things. And because that was bad, anybody who feels a sense of patriotism must also be just as evil. That's the argument anyway. And it's total BS. Just because elephants are gray does not mean all great things are elephants. Now, I think there's, without getting into like a 2-hour discussion about the importance of patriotism and the psychological effects, there's a reason why patriotism is important, because your nation is the place where people who have similar values and beliefs come together to, form a foundation for social interaction. And so we need a nation for a lot of different reasons, because with that system, common belief and common value, you create the foundation for cooperation, and then that cooperation creates the foundation for agreements like a social contract. So without getting too deep into the, civics of it all, if you didn't have common beliefs and a sense of pride, so to speak, or the belief that your beliefs were beneficial for you and your loved ones and the people around you, then the delicate fabric of what makes a country would dissolve. And in times in history when that delicate fabric has dissolved for various reasons, then you get a destabilization of the country. You get all sorts of civil problems, antisocial behavior, violence, criminality, all sorts of major issues start to pop up. So there is a healthy sense of national pride out there. This isn't something that is egocentric. It's not, something that's going to cause potential problems with nationalism like we saw with Nazi Germany. Obviously, you want to be objective with your pride. So I happen to be patriotic. I love the United States, and I do believe that the United States is one of the best countries in the world, not because I happen to just be in the United States, but because the United States is the only country in the world that, as a function of its founding documents and its essential legal structure, we might say, well, that's not the best terms I'm looking for, but the United States holds sacred as an explicit feature of the founding documents, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, that personal sovereignty is sacred and extremely important. And we've built our whole, civil structure around personal sovereignty, which is that your rights and your freedoms are extremely important. And the thing that enables the individual's rights and freedoms to be protected is because we have aligned ourselves with the system that ensures all rights can be protected. So you might ask, how is it that rights and freedoms can be protected if we don't have some founding, agreement structure? And the answer is they can't. If you don't have a system that acknowledges that everybody at least has equal value under the law, then provides a system to protect that, then what you get is a morally relativistic system. You get a class or caste system. And so, that's one reason why the United States is very important. And so far as the way to measure the true health and vitality of a nation is by how well the laws of that nation protect the inherent sovereign rights of the individual, especially in their capacity to pursue the creator. Because the bottom line, as I'm sure a lot of people on this stream will agree with, and not be surprised when I say it, we do live in a reality where God exists, and God is the ultimate quest. In a lot of ways, to put it very simply, the entire universe exists specifically so that you, whoever you are, wherever you are in your corner of the world, can seek for God, know God, and strive to be like God. As a matter of fact, the system is so well organized. The universe is so well designed for this purpose that it's as if literally everything in existence exists only to help you find the creator. That's how powerfully it exists, how powerfully it works. And, we can certainly get into how that works at some point. We have been with this whole Urantia book discussion that we've been doing. So if you're interested, go ahead and sign up for the Zoom only portion, which is going to come in part 2 in the second half of this. So yeah, those are really important aspects of the United States. Now, is it possible that some other country could do it better than us? Absolutely. And if that country did, and I felt like and had identified the features that made them superior, I'd be the first one to tell you, hey, guess what? Looks like this country just surpassed us. And it's that level of qualified pride that we should be using. There's blind pride, which is that no matter how horrible things are, you're just going to continue to be proud of this thing that you probably shouldn't be. And then there's qualified pride, which is that you actually are using a good system to measure this. So So yeah, okay, we'll leave that there. I could keep talking, obviously, but well, let's move on to the next one. Where is that stupid thing? There it is. Okay. So let's do the John McAfee story. So for those of you who don't know, John McAfee he committed suicide recently, although a lot of people think he was suicided, which means he was basically murdered and it was labeled a suicide. And so this is not an uncommon phenomenon that we experience in the modern world. And, I would argue, if you look at history and you ask yourself how many of the people that supposedly killed themselves or died under various circumstances actually died by their own, or actually died as it was claimed by history, probably be not a lot of people. In other words, can you really trust history? Can you really trust that somebody like Epstein really did kill himself? Can you trust that, somebody like McAfee really killed himself, especially when there's a lot of signs that he didn't? Well, I'm not going to go over the whole story, but I wanted to show you this story. This is coming from the National File. Headline: John McAfee's widow calls mainstream media a malignant cancer, says suicide story was prepared and fabricated. Subheadline says, words cannot describe how enraged I am. This is the wife of John McAfee, at the fact that I had to hear that, excuse me, I'll just start again. Words cannot describe how enraged I am at the fact that I had to hear the news of John's death via a DM on Twitter. And now it's being conveniently reported that there was a suicide note found in his pocket, something that was not mentioned when I collected John's belongings from prison, and another piece of information the media somehow got a hold of before myself and John's attorneys. So I'm assuming that this is John's wife. I don't actually know. Let's see. I'm going to continue reading the quote here. The story of John's suicide was already prepared and presented to the public before I or his attorneys were even notified of his death, the statement noted. This is a statement from Janice McAfee. Words cannot describe how enraged I am at the fact that I had to hear the words from, okay, I already read that part. All right, so the investigation into John's death is still ongoing, but I will share what information I can when I can. Until then, I do not accept the suicide story that has been spread by the malignant cancer that is the mainstream media. And they and their unnamed sources are not to be trusted. John McAfee's lawyer, Javier Villalba, hopefully I pronounced that right, has stated that, quote, at no point had McAfee shown any special worry or clue that could let us think that this could have happened, and added that he felt, quote, pain, anger, lack of understanding, because it was not justified under any circumstances that this man remain in the jail. So think about this, guys. Like John McAfee, imprisoned, he doesn't feel like it was a fair thing that he got imprisoned. So it's not like he felt unyielding remorse and shame that led him to commit suicide, which is one of the modus operandi or MOs or motivations for these type of thing. So should we really trust the mainstream media? It was apparently he also had, I want to say, 31 terabytes of information on various political figures that he believed could bring down some of these people and create a lot of scandal. We'll just put it that way. So do you think that there was an interest in the powers that be to get rid of this person? Have they done this before? And should we, the public, just simply accept the situation as it's presented because we don't have access to the details? Absolutely not. We should fight this tooth and nail. How many people throughout history have potentially been killed because they had information damaging to the deep state and the cabal? I think a lot of people. As a matter of fact, we're going to go over one of those people later today, which is Bill Cosby, in my estimation, based on the research I've done recently. So there you have it. That's the story about John McAfee. If anybody has any interesting nuggets or clues about the McAfee situation, go ahead and let me know. I can see just a shout out to everybody in the YouTube chat. I see we got a lot of people in there. How's it going, everybody? And we're going to continue on with our next story here, which is Americans don't believe Biden is in charge. This is really inspiring. You know, there's so much craziness happening that, you know, it's hard to know, especially because we're so locked into our little, you know, worlds these days where we don't have a public square to speak about. We don't go to the common grounds of the town to talk to each other on Sundays after church or anything like this anymore. So it's really hard to gauge what other people think. And we trust, you know, the mainstream media and social media to gauge what is trending and what isn't, which is obviously a recipe for truth disaster. So I think things like this are encouraging. And the headline reads, poll, majority of Americans don't believe Joe Biden calls the shots in the White House. New poll confirms what many Americans already believe. Joe Biden is not calling the shots in the White House. According to the poll from the Trafalgar Group, a majority of Americans believe that, quote, others are running, or quote, others, end quote, are running the show in the White House and not Biden himself. Below are some of the main takeaways from the poll. That's huge. I mean, yeah, like holy mackerel, guys, like the fact that that's a thing that's happening. I mean, I can't emphasize how important it is that a lot of people believe this. You know, this is in other countries, it's like, yeah, no kidding, there's corrupt forces. Like if you go to any other type of totalitarian regime, most of the people would be like, no kidding, you know, what things aren't what we think. But here we have some highlights from the poll. 56.5% of American voters do not believe the president is fully executing the duties of his office, while 36.4% believe he is directing all policy and agenda. So literally less than half of the country actually believes this man's calling the shots. Now, to be fair, I don't know what the norm is. So I don't know exactly what, you know, we've seen in the past. But it shows you the level of lack of confidence that the American people have in this regime, which is a really good sign. Because at the end of the day, the leadership coming from the halls of authority in any country have to contend with the confidence problem. Leaders, you know, as it was spoken in the Declaration of Independence, government is derived by the consent of the governed. If we, the people, the body politic, didn't convey our rights to authoritative bodies to govern the country, then there would be no country. There would be a bunch of, you know, smaller states and factions. So it's really critical that the government, even corrupt governments, have to work really hard to buy in, to get the buy-in from the people. And in situations where there's what we might say combative totalitarianism, where the leader is basically like, I'm the leader, you can suck it up and deal with it if you don't, if you want. If you don't, then well, I'm just going to kill you. You know, in those situations, what tends to happen is people around the leader then work to rebel against the leader. So the more you can think about it like this might be a good ratio. There's a direct relationship between the degree of totalitarianism and the likelihood of generating rebellious counter movements. So they're directly proportional. And this is something that we've seen throughout history. As a matter of fact, I did, I think, 2 episodes of this subject in season 2 of Into the Storm, where we get into the deeper aspects of Luciferianism and analyzing Greek culture and the kind of the hero becomes a tyrant cycle that we often see. So let's read a few more of these things. 31.7% of Democratic voters do not believe that President Biden is fully executing the duties of his office, while 58.6% believe he is directing all policy and agenda. Again, massive amounts of people. 83.6% of Republican voters do not believe that President Biden is fully executing the duties of his office, while 11% believe he's directing all policy and agenda. Well, not a big surprise there, but I mean, man, 83% of Republicans, that's a lot of people that don't believe that Biden is calling the shots. 58.4% of independent voters do not believe that President Biden is fully executing the duties. So it's the independents, 58% there. So, I mean, if you combine all those, we're looking at a situation where likely between independents and Republicans, we're sitting at a situation where probably half of the country just flat out does not believe that Biden is really the leader, that there's somebody behind him. Now, do they go as far as to thinking that there's some kind of nefarious cabal, that there's, the Illuminati or various groups like this? Probably not, but the idea is in place. Now, psychologically, I want to really emphasize this because it's one of the main points to understand about how to understand the evolution of consciousness, as well as why the current method of the alliance is the one that they've chosen, as well as why ideas add up and weave tapestries together. So there's a lot to pack in there, but the basic idea is this. If you're going to control the population, you need them to believe in the situation. They need to believe that they are at the very least going to be able to survive and not feel threatened, even if they're living in a totalitarian situation. If people start to believe, if we're moving from a situation where a lot of people believe that there's no corruption, that there are no insidious forces, that whoever's in government is the people who are actually in government are doing, and there's no hidden forces behind them. If we're moving from that to a situation where people actually believe that there are puppets by and large and that there are hidden forces, that's a major shift. Particularly in the United States, one of the things that the Cabal have done with expert skill is these normal things of corruption in government and power that has been like a standard feature of what people believe throughout history has dissolved in the modern age. Like for most of history, it was just assumed that the king or the leaders around the king or the priest class or you name it, anybody in power was going to be corrupt in some degree, that they were at the very least going to be tempted by corruption. But now we're living in the United States, and this just goes to show you the naivete of the American people, but the first world more than the American people. The first world people, we live in this world where we just take on faith that the people in power are really the ones in power. That the reason why there's not corruption, but the reason why that things don't work well in government isn't because there's corrupt people doing nefarious things. It's because they're just good-intentioned people that things go wrong all of a sudden, or the system's broken, a la critical race theory, right? It's not that there's really a cabal out there that has as part of its agenda dividing and conquering the people via race war. What it is that there's this systemic corruption, and good people are getting corrupted by this systemic, racist patriarchy. So it's in a way, it's like you have to respect and give credence to the skill at which these deceivers have taken some of the most intelligent people on earth, the people who were in the United States prior to the infusion of mass media, without qualifying that, let's just accept that as a point. Let's just assume that the United States, between its founding and around the 1910s and 20s, were some of the most advanced people on the planet. Of course, there was advanced people elsewhere, and I don't want to offend anybody necessarily, but the reason I mention that is because we had all sorts of, we had some of the best technology, we had some of the best industry, we had some of the best legal policies, we definitely, as I mentioned earlier, had the best founding documents. So there's a reason why a lot of governments the world over wanted to mimic what the United States is doing. It's the same reason when you're looking at somebody in a crowd and you're like, man, that guy is moving from this end of the crowd to the other end of the crowd. Let's follow him because he seems to know what he's doing. So same basic idea, no superiority complex, just what I just described. To go from that to a point where your average person doesn't even acknowledge the possibility of shenanigans happening last year, I have to be careful what I'm saying because I'm on YouTube, is, like I said, a crowning achievement to the propagandists. So wanted to mention that. Some good news on those sides and things of this sort. Okay. I took a look at the chat and I see somebody's asking or mentioning Getter. It's the new social media. We do have a Getter account if you guys want to know. We have been posting on Getter, I believe it's pronounced, Gettr. So yeah, if you're interested, you can follow us there. We've been posting on there for a while. Okay, let's see. We're at 7:44. Let's pull another one. Well, let me just take a moment because the Bill Cosby thing is going to chew up a ton of time. There's just so much to cover there. All right. Okay, I'm just going to briefly go over a couple items, and then we're going to play another video, and then we're going to get into the Bill Cosby thing. And then at the end of that, we'll switch over to the private Zoom only version. So let me take a moment to say, if you haven't already, go to the description of this video, click on the subscribe star. You can pay $3 a month. That's the minimum to gain access to the full live stream. You can ask me questions. I'll sit there and we'll back and forth question wise. And then you can access to all of the notes. The other thing, I do not make my notes publicly available. In order to see the notes, you have to be a subscriber on Subscribestar. Everything I'm talking about, I have all the links, everything in there, including what I'm reading. So you can even see like the words that I literally use to talk about these things. So go ahead and check that out. Okay, so next story. According to National Geographic, fireworks are racist because smoke disproportionately affects Black people. That's ludicrous. Like, just because something disproportionately affects one race over another doesn't mean that there's some intention behind the people, perpetrating the fireworks to think that they're superior than Black people. And this is the reason I wanted to bring this up. One is because it's a ludicrous story that's comical in its ludicrousness. The other reason is that I wanted to highlight the degradation of language. There's a really awesome book produced by UCAD. It's called Tara. And in the book, they describe all sorts of things. It claims to be the lost book of Jeremiah. And one of the things they discuss in the first section is why the forces of darkness, the Cabal, the evil ones, the cult of the Black Sun, as I sometimes refer to them, they have to destroy language. They have to create multiple competing meanings for different words. So that way, when you speak, you think certain things in your head, another person hears something totally different. You actually got no sharing of information. And that's part of what's happening here. That's what I'm highlighting for you here, is that they want you to think just because smoke disproportionately affects Black people, that the people who are setting off the fireworks, or the firework manufacturers, or the United States, or I don't even know who, are somehow racist. That's insane. What it's really doing is they want to make the definition of racism so diluted that it could mean almost anything depending on whatever the person wants to say. And as another point on this, racism is a reprehensible thing to believe in. So if you're a racist, then culturally, you are effectively equivalent to something like a pedophile. Like, that's that level of disgust that people have. So they want to take that social disgust mechanism, which throughout history that has been used. Social disgust is one of the biggest engines for social control you can think of. It's everywhere, especially throughout history and definitely today. So they're trying to use that. They're weaponizing language to create a system within our culture that says if you get labeled a racist, now you're a second-class citizen, you're less than human, and you can have all sorts of horrible things done to you because you did the ultimate crime of being a racist. Although you had to ask, what definition of racism are you using here? Because, like, what in the hell does setting fireworks off have to do with being a racist? So there's that story. Another big story, this is something really big. Trump announced his class action lawsuit against tech giants Twitter, Facebook, and Google. This is massive. As far as I know, there is no class action lawsuit that has been made against big tech specifically related to the censorship of free speech ever. So this is a major class action lawsuit. Class action lawsuit, for those of you who don't know what it is a bunch of people who have been disaffected by something. In this case, Facebook, Twitter, and Google pool their collective rights together, and they all kind of create like a big giant legal case. And now that legal case goes forward, and everybody can have their harm or issues that they had to deal with resolved and adjudicated. So it's really big. If you haven't already, go to this site. I thought there was another version of it. Hold on. I'll just put in this one. I'm going to put it into the Zoom chat for everybody. I'm also going to pop it into the YouTube feed, and you can add your name to the list apparently using this link. So if you feel like you've been censored and you want to participate in this class action lawsuit, you can do so using the link I just posted in the chats on Zoom and on YouTube. It's really important that we do this because the weight of this case is going to rest partially on the amount of people that pool their energy, because it's going to be partially on a preponderance of evidence. The counterclaim by big tech and the media is that, oh, there's no censorship happening. We have to do something about hate speech. We have to deal with, maintain political correctness, and words are violence. And as a result, censorship is required. But more to the point, there is no systemic censorship. It's interesting because the same people that tell you that there's systemic racism in a country that has literally no racism, as a matter of fact, the only systemically racist things in the United States legal system are things against white people, because we have this thing called affirmative action that disenfranchises or marginalizes a non-colored person, or I guess these days I have to say like cisgendered, because it also lumps in transgenders, people who are who are homosexual or genderqueer, all these different things. So the only systemically, prejudicial component to our legal system is the very system of laws that disenfranchise people, white people, cisgender white people, from having jobs and access to institutions. Isn't that interesting? And these same people are telling us that there is no such thing as systemic censorship. Give me a break. So anyway, go ahead to that website, check the chat out. I expect big things from this. Now, one question is, well, when can we see some results? Class action lawsuits take time. I don't think that we're going to see something like by the end of this month, or certainly by the end of this year. Well, it's possible. I just don't think it's likely. What tends to happen in class action lawsuits is they settle. So proving them can be challenging, or letting them go to fruition can be challenging, because there's a lot of evidence that needs to be discussed. And what tends to happen is that one party will say, hey, instead of dealing with this court here, we're going to talk to each other and try to figure out some way to affect a settlement. You say that you've been damaged by our censors. We're going to pay you $100 for every post you think got censored, something like that. And then as a result of accepting the settlement, you waive your right to future suit. So you basically kind of, accept, oh, well, now I've been made whole by this, and I'm not going to file further lawsuits. So that's what a class action is all about. So go ahead and check that out. I'd be curious to know any thoughts you guys have about all the class action stuff. Like, what do you think is going on in there? Desiree asks, is our chat on Discord? We actually do have a Discord server. I haven't been using it because I haven't had somebody to admin it. But if people are interested in Discord as a place to chat and communicate, I'd be happy to figure out a way to get that set up somehow. So if you're interested, go ahead and sound off in the YouTube chat or on Zoom and let me know. And you can also send me an email and let me know that way. So I'll keep my eyes and ears open for whether or not we want a Discord chat. Or a forum or something. I would actually like a forum, because one of the dreams I have for Stillness is to create a space where people can together discuss all sorts of things. And I used to have the Facebook group. We had like almost 23,000 people in there at one point, but it got taken with everything else. All right, so let's continue on here. National Geographic. I already talked about the Cosby. Okay, so the globalists are holding a Bilderberg-style meeting, and that's going to be happening this week. As a matter of fact, it might have already happened, so let's talk a little bit about that. Oh, looks like hold on one second. There it is. Okay. All right. So globalist technocrats told Bilderberg-Style secret meeting is in Idaho this week. Mainstream media figures, big tech moguls, investors, intelligence insiders, former government officials, and titans of industry are set to meet in Sun Valley, Idaho, this week for an annual conference held by intensively private investment bank Allen & Co. The annual globalist meeting, dubbed the Summer Camp for Billionaires by NPR, is being held in the small town of Sun Valley, Idaho this week. The attendees are meeting to plot some of the biggest deals in media and tech, among other undisclosed agenda items. Prominent globalist kingpins such as Apple CEO Tim Cook, Berkshire Hathaway's Warren Buffett, Walt Disney CEO Bob Chapek, Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg, Sony CEO Kenichiro Yoshida, Comcast Brian Roberts, Netflix Ted Sarandos, and Reed Hastings will be attending the exclusive meeting hosted by private investment bank Allen & Co. It says here as an excerpt, Mike Pompeo attended when he was the head of the CIA, and Mercuricio Macri, apologies there, was a guest when he was the president of Argentina. And then at night, there's cocktail parties and lavish dinners. And participants are not wined and dined by just any banker. Allen & Co. deal makers are prominent former members of Congress, including Republican Will Hurd and Senator Bill Bradley, and George Tenet, the former director of the CIA. So, what's the big deal? Like, who cares? Well, it's massive. I mean, just to give you a little tidbits, these people, the big tech, big media, big business, big government, all of the big things out there are affecting our lives more than anything else. As a matter of fact, it's debatable whether or not the laws of any country actually hold sway when you're dealing with multinational, transnational conglomerates that seem to have more power than a nation, right? I mean, look at Twitter. Look at big tech. Twitter is probably the one that's most glaringly obvious. They've censored permanently the leader of the free world, the leader of the United States, off of their platform. Now, you might be saying, well, who cares? They're a private platform. They can do whatever they want. Well, they can, and so far as they're a private platform, and they do have the right as a private platform to decide who and who is not on their platform. But they have to follow their own rules in order to maintain certain legal statuses, which is part of the basis for the lawsuit, I'd imagine, that Trump is bringing forward. So without getting into like a complete exposition of how these companies and things are affecting our lives, the big point I want you to walk away from here is that there's a conspiracy at work. When I say conspiracy, I mean that literally. People are gathering behind closed doors to talk about things that are going to affect your life and the status and health of countries all over the planet. These same type of meetings took place when, what was it? Event 301, I believe. I think that's the name of it. Event 301, which was the kind of beta test for the coronavirus pandemic. Those policies were implemented as a result of meetings like this. So if you don't think that these meetings are important, like, man, I mean, I know everybody on the call probably definitely believes that they're important, but just to emphasize like how serious this is, these things are massive. I would argue in a truly enlightened society, and this is something that Kennedy spoke to, we would not allow these kind of things to happen. Like, it's not that a company can't talk about and engage in business in private. No, of course that can happen. But what shouldn't be allowed to happen is these organizations shouldn't be allowed to conspire to undermine the sovereignty of individuals or to generate plans and agendas that are specifically designed to further their agendas at the cost of the well-being and welfare of the whole population of the planet. That's what I think is reprehensible. So yeah, that's happening this week. It might have already happened. As a matter of fact, let me see. I don't know if it says when it actually has happened. It might have happened or is happening right now. So there you have it. Well, likely we'll see some things coming from that. Okay, and another one. Let's talk about Stacy Abrams. Stacy Abrams. This is, boy, she is a interesting character. We'll put it that way. Okay, hold on one second. Thank you, Julia. Well, if you're a member of Subscribestar, the question is, where is your Discord? Because we had one on Subscribestar linked. Yes, I actually, as I mentioned, I do have a Subscribestar Discord link that has happened. So, you can communicate or send questions to the Discord server I set up for Subscribestar. The only issue is that there's nobody really in it because I don't check it and nobody's been using it thus far. So we can use it. If you want to send me a message more to your question, and anybody who has this question, you can, if you're a member Subscribestar, you can send me a direct message using the message there. You can also post a comment on any number of the posts that we have up. Or you can send me an email at justin.deschamps@stillnessinthestorm.com. And if you're not able to get to me that way, you can just go to stillnessinthestorm.com on the about, or no, on the, where is it? We just changed the layout, so I'm a little, there we go, contact. Just click on contact and it'll get you to a place where you can message me. Okay, so let's get into the Stacy Abrams. So Stacy Abrams, if you're not aware, this is Stacy Abrams. Let's take a look at her. She is the former Democratic candidate for governor. And she lost in, I think it was 2018, to Brian Kemp in Georgia for the governor's seat. When she lost, I want to say it was several months after the fact, she claimed that the election was stolen from her. And it was related to preventing Black voters the access to vote using some type of, vote rigging scenario. I don't know enough of the details to say, but the short version of the story is that she claims that there was election rigging. And the mainstream media just totally accept this. And she has kind of become the poster child for the fact that there is corruption in our voting system. When in reality, it's hard to know what exactly is happening, but I would argue that what could have happened with the Stacey Abrams situation is that they needed to own the idea of election fraud, because if they didn't get ahead of the election fraud story, then when it was used later, then it would be more shocking to people. So when it comes to controlling public opinion, what you want to do is any time that there's a piece of information that could emerge, that could damage your agenda, you actually want to come out with the information first, and then you can frame how people receive it. And that's what happened here. Very short version of it. So, but I didn't want to detail everything Stacey Abrams had done. What I wanted to do is I wanted to talk to you about this situation. So the story is entitled, Stacey Abrams purchased 2 Georgia homes valued at $1.4 million after reporting massive debts in 2018. The former Georgia Democratic gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams purchased 2 homes worth a combined $1.4 million following her failed 2008 bid to lead the state. Public records reviewed by the Daily Caller News Foundation show. I checked those records, they are valid. So Abrams purchased the homes despite reporting a financial disclosure in early 2018 during her gubernatorial campaign that showed the IRS that she owed, the IRS $54,000 in back taxes on top of $174,000 in credit card debt and student loan debt. So where did this come from? These mansions, as it says here, these are 3,300 square foot homes. One of them's in Stone Mountain. I've been there. I'm actually right around the corner. It's gorgeous over there. And another one is did they list the other one? Yes, the other one is a 4,100 square foot home in the city of Atlanta that's valued at looks like $97,000 $975,000. So where did this money come from? And these homes have increased in value since she's purchased them. I mean, think about it. Like, you just had a totally failed campaign. You're probably swimming in debt. This is what tends to happen after you campaign. And all of a sudden, you're just going to not only get rid of all of your debt, but you're going to buy like massive homes. Like, how'd this happen? You would think, wait a minute, wouldn't we want, if the cabal wanted Stacey Abrams to be in office, why would they reward her for her failed gubernatorial race? Well, because, as I was mentioning in the beginning, I think she was probably rewarded for the good work she did because her part in the role or her part in the scheme was not to win the seat. Her part was to control the narrative around election fraud. And I think that's what's happened. So now when people think election fraud, they don't think about the things that happened, last year. What they think of is, oh, you mean like Stacey Abrams and how Brian Kemp stole the election from her? Oh, you mean how like black people can't vote because, voter ID laws prevent them from voting? I mean, there's a video that came out. It's actually been up for a few years now. I don't have access to it, but we did post it on Stillness at one point, and it's this guy who's interviewing college students in, I want to say it's Florida, about why voter ID laws are racist. And the tropes that you hear from the radical left in the media is that, well, black people don't have access to the internet. They don't know where the DMV is. They can't get driver's licenses. They don't know how to read. Like really stuff that you heard and you think, well, man, that kind of sounds racist or at the very least prejudicial. And these college students are like, oh yeah, voting ID laws are racist because black people can't get to the DMV. They don't have access to IDs, so they can't prove who they are, which is ludicrous. And so then in the same video, this guy goes to New York City and he's in Harlem and he's asking black people like, what do you think about what these college students said? And the black people are like, well, the DMV is right over there on this corner of this street and this street. Here, want to know my ID? Here it is. And the guy like pulls out his ID. So clearly insanity. So you don't get a whole lot of clarity as to where this income came from. So there's a uncertainty there, but apparently Abrams' nonprofit group, Fair Fight Action, saw its revenues increase tenfold to 10.9 million in 2019, but the group hasn't paid Abrams a salary since 2016, according to Forms 990s. So I don't know exactly why. Didn't have the time to do like a deep forensic dive into all this, but I suspect, having studied financial corruption in other areas, that what probably happened is that the way the cabal likes to do their stuff, they create organizations, foundations, charities. You're Stacey Abrams, or I'm Stacey Abrams. I've successfully done a good job at doing what I was told back in 2018 in the Brian Kemp situation. So how do you pay me for my services? Well, you can't pay me directly because then that creates a chain and you need to have plausible deniability. So what you do is Stacey Abrams, before this, creates a foundation for like, I don't know, advancing the cause of fashion in the black community, whatever, something like that. And then Nike or some other organization donates a ton of money to Stacey Abrams, and then she can use that money in some fashion, various different types of ways. So there's all sorts of different methods for funds and value to be transferred when these kind of corruption events are happening. So that's very interesting. Or a book deal. Yes, that's right. Thank you, Catherine. She did have a book deal, and apparently the book was like pretty darn successful. Now, I don't know if people really care all that much. I mean, there's some other people who wrote these books, like Obama, like he apparently sold like a ridiculous amount of these books, but did he really? I don't know. I mean, this is the fringe of my knowledge, so I'm just kind of spitballing here. I'm just speaking off the top of my head, speculating. I suspect that if you were to take a forensic analysis of how these people get their money, Obama, Stacey Abrams, Hillary Clinton, and you look at all the funding sources and you dig into those funding sources, I hazard to guess that some of these funding sources you will see in plain black and white in the numbers, a clear inconsistencies. Like, for example, how is it that Hunter Biden sold as many books as he did? If Joe Biden wrote a book and it sold like an insane amount of copies, but the guy could barely get 10,000 people to watch him speak when he does a live stream. You know what I mean? You see the inconsistency here? Yes, money laundering, exactly. Money laundering is a huge, huge thing. There's lots of ways that they do it. Perhaps one day I'll do a deep dive into some of that, but it's a massive way they do it. All right, so next story we have, I think we might be ready to get into the Cosby thing. All right, well, before we get into the Cosby thing, I wanted to show you, I wanted to show you another inspiring video. So here we go. Oh, wait, no, I did that one. Give me 1 second here. While I'm pulling this up, if you haven't already done so go to the description of this video, click on subscribe star, sign up for $3 a month. You can get access to the full stream. I'm going to take the stream to Zoom only, probably in about 15 to 20 minutes, depending on how quickly we get through the Bill Cosby story. Okay, so, oh man, I guess I don't have access to that. Okay. Well, let's do this one. We're going to look at what Tucker said on his show recently about the Biden administration. All right, there she is. Okay, so those of you who don't know, this is Gab. We have a presence on Gab, Stillness in the Storm. So if you want to check it out, we post all sorts of cool stuff there. Gab's a pretty cool place. It's got a lot of different things that are happening on there. And it's a decent social media platform. Lots of things they're doing. So this is the video I wanted to show you. And let's go ahead and listen to what Tucker says here.
Before we continue, this show, in the interest of accuracy, will cease referring to the White House or anything associated with the entire executive branch of government as the, quote, Biden administration. And the reason we're changing is not to make a statement, but merely to reflect reality. Joe Biden, whatever his merits as a human being, has no active role in running the U.S. government. Everyone knows that. Everyone pretends otherwise. But it's true. And so henceforth, we will refer to it as the administration, the White House, the Kamala Harris administration, the third and far more radical Obama administration, this group of people that Susan Rice seems to be in control of, or whatever, something precise and accurate. But no longer we refer to it as the Biden administration because it's not. Damn! Before we continue this show.
Okay, so there you have it. Now, he didn't come out and say anything too damning, but the writing's on the wall. Like, this goes along with what we were talking about earlier with the polls. Like, there are these polls where people believe, a good chunk of people, arguably the majority, so more than 50%, 51% of the population, likely believe that Biden is not actually running the show, that he's at the very least a puppet controlled by who knows in the United States government, or worse, he's a Chinese asset or a cabal stooge or something to this effect. So that's really a lot. And for Tucker to say that, I know Tucker kind of got, he lost some clout with the patriotic community because of the way he treated Sidney Powell a few months ago. But, I don't think we should totally dismiss the man because of, some of his less than glorious moments in the past. And assuredly, he's helping to spread and fuel the fire of the belief that our government is not what we think it is. And this is important because the main enemy of freedom, in one of the pillars of the control system, we'll put it this way, one of the pillars of the control system is that we believe that there's no problem, that we actually believe the lie that, there's no corruption in government, that if there is corruption, then it's just because there are a few bad apples, but by and large, everybody in government's doing the best they can, and they just have good intentions, but they don't know what they're doing. Obviously, that's not true. So really important that we dismantle these illusions and have healthy disillusionment, so the destruction of illusions. Okay, so now let's get into Bill Cosby. So this was Admittedly, when I started digging into the Bill Cosby story, I didn't have a whole lot of understanding of even what had happened. I mean, obviously, I knew that he had been accused of all sorts of sexual misconduct, but I didn't know the details. I didn't know to what extent. I didn't know if he admitted it. I didn't know if, if it was just a he said, she said. So just pouring through this case was a really awesome education on how, not only how the legal system works, but how important it is to understand the details. In our current society, because of time constraints, we're working too much, we don't have an understanding about how these aspects of our society work. It's very easy to glaze over details and be like, well, this guy had, for example, this is one of the perspectives. This is the Me Too movement perspective. Well, he had a ton of women, 60 different women come out and say that they had been abused by him. Clearly, if there's that many women coming out, then it must be true and we should just believe everything they say. Well, we don't want to discount people without a good reason, but we don't want to just believe everybody because, as it turns out, there is a known history within law enforcement and pretty much throughout history for people, not just women, but people, to fabricate all sorts of lies about how they were harmed by a person because they want to get access to his money. And I think this happens enough for us to at least acknowledge that it's possible that some of these situations might have happened with Cosby. So my point here is that there's nuance, there's details. If we don't understand the details, we will end up believing something that is, at the very least, not the most clear presentation of the truth, or at worst, a total fraud and deception. And this is how the agenda of control works: is you don't want to create a narrative that is totally and completely fabricated lies. What you want is something that is the closest to the truth as humanly possible. And they'll switch little details, and then you're like, oh, well, these other 6 things are true. Obviously, the 7th one must be true as well. And that's how they get you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just pour through the information that I pulled for this, and I'll pause periodically to discuss. So the comments, as a matter of fact, I don't know, maybe I'll pull up a picture. Yeah, no, I won't pull up a picture. Nobody wants to see his face probably. Okay, so I'll just go through it. Let me just say to beginning, when I titled this section, "The Truth About Bill Cosby," I know some people were probably like, so wait a minute, Justin, are you saying that he did no wrong and he is completely innocent? No, that's not what I'm saying. I actually do think he was not, he could have done way better with some of these things. And it's definitely some shady behavior happened. So let's go through this. So Cosby was convicted on felony counts of aggravated indecent assault in 2018, drugging and assaulting Andrea Constant in 2004, and was serving a 3 to 10 year sentence. The truth about Bill Cosby is not that he is totally innocent. It's that his immoral behavior was weaponized against him so as to suppress and delegitimize his values and ideals. At least this is what some researchers have argued, and I agree with that assertion. And I'll go into more of that as we go through. So what did Cosby say that got him in trouble with the radical left? Well, Cosby was an outspoken opponent against the thug life culture and the rampant destruction of the Black community. So for those of you who don't know, when I say thug life culture, I mean prior to somewhere around the 1980s, definitely by the 90s, this idea that being Black was synonymous with being a thug or a drug dealer or, having a harem of hoes or speaking Ebonics and all these just didn't exist. For the most part, that wasn't a feature of the culture. But then from the top down, these aspects of culture started to weave themselves into what people generally tend to think of as a Black person in the Black community. And I say air quotes because, just because you're a Black person doesn't mean you are a carbon copy or a perfect embodiment of the so-called Black community that is pushed in the media. You know, and even the term the Black community is a generalization that doesn't define some specific group. It's not like all the Black people in the world join every year for a conclave where they discuss what they're going to do as a community together. So just want to clarify that. So that's what I mean by thug life community. He was an outspoken opponent of the thug life, pro-criminal, anti-nuclear family, anti-literate, to put it in kind of blatant terms, aspects of the cultural influence machine coming from the music industry that was really targeting the Black community heavily. So in a recent Gateway Pundit article, it says, quote, prior to the slew of sexual assault allegations levied against Bill Cosby, the actor, once known as American Dad, was heralded by conservative firebrands for his reputation of pervasive liberalism in the Black community during, quote, a Call Out with Cosby national tour. In a controversial speech that was condemned by the head of the NAACP, the head of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and president of Howard University, Cosby, implored Black Americans to be more responsible, to better educate their children, abandon their use of broken English, and impose more discipline. So this is what Cosby was saying, and he was condemned by the head of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. The lower economic people are not holding up their end of this deal. These people are not parenting. I believe this is so this is Cosby speaking right now. So I'm quoting Cosby right now. The lower economic people are not holding up their end of this deal. These people are not parenting. They are buying these things for kids. $500 for sneakers, for what? And won't spend $200 for Hooked on Phonics. He admonished in his 2004 speech. They're standing on I'm further quoting Cosby. They're standing on the corner and they can't speak English. I can't even talk the way these people talk. Why you ain't, where you is, and I blamed the kids until I heard the mother talk, and then I heard the father talk. Everybody knows it's important to speak English except these knuckleheads. You can't be a doctor with that kind of crap coming out of their mouth. So that's what Cosby said. As you can imagine, in our hyper-triggerable world that we find ourselves in, statements like that, like if I had come out and said those things in today's world, I would unquestionably be labeled a racist and an oppressor and part of the patriarchy and all sorts of shenanigans. So let me continue. This is all, again, from the Gateway Pundit article. Black Americans defame themselves by calling each other the N-word, he argued. Quote, and I'm quoting Cosby here, we have to turn the mirror around because for me, it's almost analgesic to talk about what the white man is doing against us, and it keeps a person frozen in their seat. I'm talking about the profanity. I'm talking about people cursing at each other like it's something hip, like it's something that is right when it's not. I'm talking about people calling each other a name, who are cursing at your children at home. Those children hear these words. We want to ask the parents, stop yanking the child. We're going to call each other the names of ugliness. Comedians coming on TV. I'm so ugly. You're ugly. Yuck, yuck. That's all minstrel show. I'm tired of this. So basically what he's doing there, it's a little hard to follow. What he's doing there is he's saying that there's a degradation of the type of culture stuff we see in the Black community. Like, what are the things that Black comedians or musicians doing? They're using broken English, broken language. They're promoting these, thug values as I described them. And Cosby was speaking out against this. Now, what I wanted to point out here is that, remember, we just talked a little bit about the importance of language. That language is an extremely important aspect of a society for a lot of different reasons, because if you can't communicate with people, you can't create trust, you can't create prosperity, and you can't identify, criminal behavior around you, especially at the top levels. Like the biggest, baddest people at the top are shielded in the sense that the lower level people can't speak clearly about the issues that are happening. There's what the Urantia book calls ideational poverty. So it appears at some level of analysis, Cosby recognizes this, and, cheers for him for that. Despite his immoral behavior, we have to acknowledge the fact that he is speaking to these issues as a prominent Black man. Okay, so Cosby is a highly respected man. He played a doctor on TV. He was kind of like the, the darling of the Black community, Black comedy community in a lot of ways. And so his opinion has a lot of clout. And as a result, there's a undermining of the globalist agenda. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to keep going through, and then we're going to wrap all that back in towards the end. So in January 2005, after a year of regularly setting off contentious national debates over cultural degradation in the Black community, so remember, he did a tour where literally for the whole tour, he was talking about how poorly the Black community had degraded, and it was citing some of the reasons why, at the very least at an ephemeral level. So on a kind of surface level, there's deeper things he might not have been aware of, but he was at least somebody in the Black community of prominence undermining this agenda that had been running rampant for 20 years, ever since probably the mid 80s, and caused a total destruction of the Black community, which there's a YouTuber, man, I can't remember her name, but she has revealed a ton of information about the Black plantation. Candace Owens has a lot of information about that. I don't necessarily agree with everything she says, but there's a lot there. PragerU has a lot of information. So if you want to look more about what's called the Black plantation, it's the idea that the Black culture was systematically destroyed and undermined. Divorce rates skyrocketed, abortion rates are endemic and huge. Crime rates are endemic. All sorts of problems have emerged from the Black community right alongside the emergence of this thug life culture that we saw come out in the 80s. Okay, so let's look at some of the facts. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to list all the facts. So right now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty details to a certain extent, nothing offensive. We're going to get into the details about what actually happened with some of his sexual assault allegations and the legal proceedings around that, because these are important to understand why he was actually released from prison recently and why the Supreme Court overturned the conviction. So Cosby admitted to drugging Andrea Constand, his 2005 accuser, and engaging in sexual acts that were indecent. Thus, by Cosby's own admission, he engaged in uncouth behavior. So let's just get that crystal clear right away. I am not arguing that Cosby did not assault these women. I don't know how many women he assaulted, but he definitively, by his own admission, admits to assaulting at the very least Andrea Constand. So there's at least one woman who was sexually assaulted. And we're going to get into the details of that, and I'll have some commentary there. Constand said she was Constand, so the woman who accused him, said she willingly took drugs, believing it would help her relax, which were Benadryl, confirmed by the police. Now, Cosby admitted to using Quaaludes in the past with some other different women, but he said that when he gave Constand these drugs, it was basically within the spirit of giving a woman an alcoholic drink, like at a bar or something like that. Now, let me just pause here without getting too deep into it. It's this type of behavior is unsettling and disturbing, unquestionably. In an ideal world, if a man wanted to engage in sexual relations with a woman, he would be very upfront about his desires so that she could make an informed choice as to whether or not she wanted to, and maybe, they would be explicit and we'd have some kind of contract or signed disclosure and waiver. And I don't know. I mean, the bottom line is that sexual relations is something that has to be agreed to, obviously. But it's not like, as a guy specifically, you're not going up to women in the bar and be like, hello, my name is Justin. I would like to engage in sexual relations later tonight. Is that something you're interested in? You just don't do that. Like, the reality is that in the real world, the game of lovemaking and, hooking up with people, you often rarely, if ever, actually speak explicitly to your interest and await a form of consent. What consent tends to look like in the real world is a guy makes a move. He tries to kiss a girl. He tries to hold her body. He grabs her ass or something like that. But he makes his sexual intentions known through physical display. And she does another display that says, hey, I don't want this, by pulling away or saying no, or I don't want this, or making some expression of her fact that she doesn't want to consent to the behavior. If she doesn't do that, if she relaxes into it, if she allows herself to be touched, if she doesn't stop the behavior, then that is often construed as consent. And I would argue, based on my studies and research, and I have actually studied these things, the vast, vast, vast majority of sexual interaction happens like that. So we got to put this in context, mind you, because I'm not saying his behavior is idyllic and he did everything right. No, what he basically did was he knew in his own mind that he wanted to give drugs to women because he knew it would make them, more relaxed and looser, and they would likely be more willing to comply for his sexual advances. But what I just said is what like 99% of all men do, and women, by the way, do in the general dating game, especially when it comes to going to bars or things like this. Like, be honest, like if a man was in a bar and he was buying a woman a drink, do you think that he's not aware of the fact that the drink is going to make her less inhibited so that she could potentially be receptive to his approaches later on? Of course. It's just like, that's standard. Now, is that right or is that ethical? I don't know. That's another discussion. But in terms of how offended and pissed off we should be as people looking at this situation, it's on the spectrum of horrible things. You got outright rapists who assault a woman, she's saying no, and he's in there and he's doing his thing anyway, even though she's like flailing her arms saying no. Then you got total consent on the other end of the spectrum. Like, he makes an advance, she makes it clear that she's interested, and they have their fun. Then you've got this middle ground gray area where a guy can make an advance, he can use a drug like this, and he, in his mind, he knows what he's doing, and at some level she knows what she's doing, and if she goes along with the behavior, then for all intents and purposes it's a form of consent. And what gets dicey is if the woman later says, oh, well, actually I changed my mind, I don't want to do this. Well, how do you know? I mean, that's the challenge. I mean, these are issues that, these are the details. This is my main point. These are the details that we often overlook, especially in this Me Too movement era, where it's like, oh, well, the woman says she was raped and she regretted the sexual experience, therefore now it's rape, even though at the time she was displaying behavior that would normally lead a reasonable person to believe that she had consented. And now we just have to treat the person, the guy, as if he's a rapist in the same degree as if he had truly forced himself upon her. And that is the detailed difference that I think is insidious, because there is a major difference. And despite the fact that Cosby didn't do moral things, his level of immorality and maliciousness was only as immoral and as malicious as somebody who was giving a girl a drink because he wanted to sleep with her. I think it's at that level, maybe a little bit more, because he's using his power and influence. So again, I'm not saying that he didn't do something wrong. I would have certainly not done what he had done. And I think there are better ways to do it, but he's not in the same category as a straight up, like, absolute rapist type of a person. That's my opinion. I'd be curious to know your thoughts on the matter. So let's go ahead and, just some real quick, some commentary. Yeah, Cosby was talking about the destruction of the Black community back in the 90s. You're absolutely right. And he was getting flack for it. And another commenter says, it's such a gray area on both sides of the coin, especially back in the 70s movement. Wasn't this back in the 70s, maybe 80s? Well, the sexual assault that he was accused of happened in 2004. So let me continue on with the exposition, and then we'll wrap this section up. So Constant claims, oh, wait a minute. Okay. According to Cosby, he and Constant moved. So, sorry, I didn't include this in the preamble. Let me just frame this properly. So in 2004, Andrew Constant, was basically like a protege of Cosby. She was working with him in some capacity. I believe she wanted to be like a sports announcer or something like that. So he was mentoring her about show business and paying for education and meeting with her at some degree of regularity to help her. And so they had a relationship in a more intimate relationship than just people that just know each other because they're mentor and protege. Now, he leveraged this relationship to put her in situations where he could try to make sexual advances on her. That, I would say, is immoral. So on that point, bad form, Bill Cosby. At one point, she came over to his house. She was feeling stressed out and she had a hard time relaxing. And they were in the kitchen and he brought her 3 pills and said, "Hey, take these. It's going to help you relax." And she just took them without question, really. Didn't really ask what they were or what was going on. She trusted Cosby. And then they go into the living room and do some other things. So I'm going to continue it from there. So according to Cosby, he and Constance moved into the living room on the living room couch and began kissing and touching each other. He then began fondling her breasts and placing his fingers in her vagina. Cosby claims at no point did Constance resist or tell him to stop, thereby asserting she consented via acquiescence to the encounter. So let me pause here and say, from an outsider looking in perspective, especially if you've never had situations like this in your life, it sounds pretty nasty and dirty already. And again, for Cosby to use his rapport and influence with her as her mentor to put her in a position where he was making sexual advances on her, I think is highly unethical, deplorable behavior, and it corrupted the delicate relationship between mentor and protege. Definitely wrong, bad form. But in this situation, according to Cosby, he made advances on her and she didn't say no. She didn't display the behavior to say no. And she admits this. So just going off of what they say, this is a situation where the lines of consent are a little hazy. Now, she was under the influence of a drug. But in my research looking at this information, I didn't find anywhere where she claims explicitly, like, I was trying to stop it, but I couldn't. At one point, she says she couldn't move her body. But Cosby apparently said that she was participating. It's not like she was like, totally limp, like roofied out, and he just had her way with her. Apparently, she was, dancing with him, so to speak, as he made his advances. So again, like, how do you deal with this? Like, it's a pretty serious question. Like, if you're engaging in sexual relations with a woman and she's in that moment, she's kissing you back, she's body to body, there's a whole dance. I'm sure I don't have to describe the details, but there's a whole dance that has to happen. And she's displaying the behavior that would lead you as the man to believe that she wanted to have this encounter. How do you deal with that? If later she says, "Oh no, I didn't want to, I regretted it." If a woman regrets it, is it rape after the fact? I mean, it's a pretty serious question. In my opinion, no, it isn't. Because in that moment, despite the fact that there are influences, if you regret it later, then, that's a different situation. It's retroactive, and that creates a whole different situation. You can't pick somebody and put them in the category of rapist who forced themselves on a woman and put another person in the category who only just went along with the behavior and regretted it later as being a rapist. It mixes, it blurs the lines, and it causes other issues. So that's some of my thoughts on that. Let's go ahead and continue. So Cosby claims he never had sex with Constance in the form of penile and vaginal penetration, but he confirms in the depositions he made that he engaged in what he terms consensual sex with Constance on 3 separate occasions. So this isn't just one encounter. This is 3 different encounters, mind you, where Cosby, although I didn't find any details in the other 2 encounters, but it was relayed in the deposition I read and the summary from the Pennsylvania Supreme Court judge, which I read, that essentially the investigators and the police at the time believed that Cosby believed that in those 3 encounters, she was engaging in consensual sex with him. So again, we don't know because we weren't there, but the lines are a little blurry as far as, is he really the insidious, evil, arch villain that he's been made out to be? And yeah, exactly. I couldn't agree more, Julia. And this is one of these things, you know, I could probably spend the rest of the time talking about this because there's so much to unpack here, but I am well aware, having studied psychosocial sexual hierarchy and the male-female dynamics and dating and culture and all these stuff, which is something I've been really interested in for the past 5 years or so. Our culture has been gutted. We don't really teach young people how to navigate these things anymore. You know, the best teachers they have are like 17 magazine or Pornhub or, you know, the chat room with their friends. And this horribly deals with the situation. We should be teaching men and women too, but specifically that you can't use your power and influence to gain sexual favors with somebody. Like a teacher having sex with a 13-year-old boy because she's a hot teacher, you know, something like that. That's a weapon. That's maliciously using your power and position as a way to gain advantages that wouldn't otherwise be there. So boundaries are very important. Couldn't agree with you more, Julia. Great comments. Okay, so let's see here. Now, it was almost a year before Constand filed the complaint against Cosby, which concerned the district attorney, Castor, who presided over the investigation into whether or not the charges should be filed. So Castor is the district attorney. DA Castor issued a press release in January 2005 as to the fact Cosby was being investigated for sexual assault. So for the first time, we heard in 2005 via the district attorney who was investigating him that there was an investigation. Now, the DA contended that the delay hindered the reliability of her reconciliations. So in other words, the DA who was investigating Constand's complaint back in 2004 and 2005 was hesitant to, or had concerns about how reliable her testimony was. And this was further confirmed when Castor went through Constand's multiple statements to various investigators and identified a number of inconsistencies. So Andrea Constand had spoken to several different police departments and investigators. So she recounted her story. So what you're an investigator, what you do is you put all the stories on the table and you're like, okay, how do they match up? If you get inconsistencies, then you start to suspect that there's some lying happening. All right. So there's that. Now, is it possible that she was traumatized and she couldn't remember the facts and details? And of course, no question. But there's, you know, statistically that you see these things happen enough, and the more and more they happen, the more and more you have to acknowledge the fact that it's possible that there's parts of her testimony that can't be trusted. Now, this is further complicated by the fact that really all we have to go on are testimony. We don't have video footage. We don't have pictures. We don't have, you know, audio recordings of the encounter, anything like that. So we're going off of her word versus his word. All right, so Castor searched Cosby's home. So the DA searched Cosby's home and found no corroborating evidence to support Constand's claims. Constand was interviewed by police again, and Castor noted inconsistencies in that interview as well. So what's more, Constand contacted a civil attorney to explore financial compensation in a civil suit against Constand, or against Cosby. So all of this led the attorney to believe that there might be something insidious happening. Now, you know, it's hard for us, the general public, to know, but when you are a professional investigating these matters, you have somebody who's got a lot of money and prominence, and they are being sued by people left and right because, you know, there are people that want to take advantage of somebody's wealth and the fact that they could probably settle outside of court, whatever, because they just want the rumors to get squashed. And this happens all the time, like a ton of times. People are constantly making claims that might not be true and then getting paid off because there's a whole PR reputation situation that happens. Like if somebody comes out and claims I did something insidious when I was in high school, you know, to a young girl, something like that, not young, but, you know, a girl, a peer of mine in high school. Once that information gets spread, because we live in this believe everything that the victim says culture, even if it's not true, and she later comes out and says it's not true, my reputation will likely be permanently destroyed. And that happens. There's several cases where, in this one case I remember definitively, a young man was accused by his, I'm sorry, not a young man, a stepfather was accused by his stepdaughter of molesting and raping her from, I think she was like 13 all the way to 17. And his reputation was destroyed. He lost his job. He lost his status in the community. He got kicked out of church, like everything. Well, in like a year after the accusations were levied, she came out and said she made the whole thing up because she wanted attention. And the guy, nobody hired him back. The church didn't let him in, and his reputation still was destroyed after the fact. So that's something to keep in mind here. All right, let's keep going. Constand's behavior before and after the incident, such as continuing to meet with Cosby and speak to him on the phone as if nothing serious happened, made it difficult to secure conviction against Cosby. This is what Castor believed. So, you know, imagine you've been sexually assaulted by a man. You believe you've been sexually assaulted by a man, and you continue to talk to him after the fact like nothing happened. Now, does that mean that he's innocent? No, of course not. I mean, especially, you know, the situation. Cosby's her mentor. He's paying for her school. Have there ever been situations where people have been abused and they didn't want to say anything because they wanted to continue to receive the benefit from their abuser? Yeah, absolutely. It happens all the time. All the time. So that in and of itself is not a disqualifying piece of evidence. But it is one piece in the case that possibly she was trying to use her situation in a way that would secure a win in a civil suit. Okay. All right. So furthermore, Constand's recordings of Cosby implied that Constand was attempting to gain evidence on Cosby that she could use to compel him to provide financial compensation in exchange for not contacting the authorities. So the argument here is Constand, after the event of 2004 happened, started recording all of her conversations with Bill Cosby for the most part. And she would provide these to the police. And apparently one of the conversations was between her and her mother. It wasn't recorded, but she relayed this to the police. And they were discussing, you know, using these conversations as a way to try to get him to admit to something so that they could file a civil suit against him. So there is some, what we might say, opportunism happening on Constand's part. At least this is what the concern of the DA was. So DA Castor concluded that due to the defects in the case against Cosby, winning a case against him beyond a reasonable doubt was impossible. However, Castor wanted to assist Constand in justice by way of a civil suit against Cosby. Since Cosby could invoke the Fifth Amendment and not self-incriminate if he was to be subpoenaed in a civil suit, owing to the fact his statements would be used against him later by the state of Pennsylvania, Castor decided to drop the charges and advised that no future prosecutions should be made against Cosby. This would allow Constand's attorney to compel testimony from Cosby so that he could not invoke the Fifth Amendment, thereby ensuring Constand would, at the very least, have a good chance at winning a civil suit against Cosby. So I know it's a big, giant statement. Let me just break that up, because that's kind of the crucial linchpin behind why the Pennsylvania Supreme Court decided to overturn the conviction. Okay, first point. The district attorney of a state acts in the sovereign capacity of that state to represent the state. So what that means is that whoever's in that office of DA, they are literally representing the state as if that state was an actual person. Now, it is a person legally speaking, but it is not like an obviously natural person like us. So what he decided to do was he said, you know, listen, if first of all, the case with Cosby and Constand is shaky. If we try to bring this thing to trial, there's plenty of grounds for reasonable doubt, and it's likely that he will not be convicted. So we can't get justice there. So instead, we should pursue justice through a civil suit. And when I say justice, I mean some method of giving Constand a sense of satisfaction with respect to the fact that something at least has happened to favor her and hinder Cosby. So he wanted to get the civil suit, to facilitate the civil suit, the DA, Castor. But there's a problem, because if Cosby was in a civil suit and he was deposed, meaning he was interviewed to try to figure out what happened, he could plead the Fifth so as to not self-incriminate, and thereby it would prevent the civil suit to proceed as well as it could, because anytime any statement could be made as to implicating him, he would just say, I plead the Fifth. Because he would argue that, well, listen, if I tell you guys all the details in the civil suit, then the state of Pennsylvania is going to come after me, and I'm allowed via the Fifth Amendment to not self-incriminate. Therefore, I can invoke the Fifth Amendment. However, if the DA of Pennsylvania made a clear and unequivocal statement that they would not pursue the matter criminally with Cosby and Constant, then he could have no basis to justify using the Fifth Amendment, and therefore he would have to be fully, he would participate fully in the investigation and answer all questions without pleading the Fifth. So that's the idea. I hope that makes sense to you, because it's crucial details. The short version is that the DA wanted to prevent Cosby from using the Fifth, from pleading the Fifth. So he dropped the charges and made an unofficial statement that as the DA acting in the sovereign capacity as a representative of the state of Pennsylvania, that he would in perpetuity not pursue charges against Cosby in any fashion. Okay. All right. So in 2015, Constance settled her lawsuit with Cosby for $3.38 million. Initially, Cosby's depositions were sealed, but upon request, the presiding judge unsealed the documents, which initiated a coordinated media campaign to frame Cosby as a sick and twisted rapist. So this is where I find it very interesting. I don't know how often this happens, but you've got a deposition that is sealed to prevent the destruction of somebody's reputation. These are serious things. The state has to be careful about what information they allow of a sensitive matter to be revealed to the public, because then that person's reputation will be damaged, and then the state could be held liable. Okay. So they seal those records to prevent, these type of problems from happening. But the media, so in other words, a reporter from like the New York Times called the judge and was like, hey, I really want to get access to that deposition records. What do you say? And the judge is like, oh yeah, no problem. Here you go. Here's this extremely sensitive, damaging information. It gets all released to the public. And then this is where we start to see the distortion from the media come about. Oh, my pleasure, Julia. Glad to help. Okay, so we have just let me read this opinion. In my opinion, Cosby's manipulative behavior continued during the trial, when the only video we saw of him was this poor, visually impaired, feeble victim, comparable to what Weinstein did with his use of the walker. Harsh, but I didn't see any empathy from Cosby. Yeah, I agree, Catherine. I agree in the sense that it's not like Cosby's coming out full of remorse, at least that I've seen. Maybe he has, and if he has, then bravo Cosby for coming out with remorse. But I haven't really seen a whole lot of remorse. What I kind of see is that there's a man who got caught with his hands in the cookie jar, and he's using technicalities to try to, get out of the things that he did. While in addition to, and this further complicates the matter, the state didn't handle things properly. Constant didn't handle things properly, and then the media used this as a way to demonize a man and destroy his reputation, so the things that he represented and stood for would be marginalized. And that's part of the grand agenda I'm trying to reveal to everybody here. Okay, so let's continue on. We're almost done with this. So media distortion. It appears that after the unsealing of the Cosby depositions, the media began fanning the flames that Cosby was a sick old man who liked to rape young women and should be treated with the same disgust and rejection as someone like Harvey Weinstein. This was added to by droves of women coming forward claiming to have been victimized by Cosby, and the media who demanded we treat these claims as unquestionably true. The Me Too movement further fueled the belief that when an individual engages in deplorable behavior, everything they have ever said, done, or believed in should be rejected with the same level of disgust and revulsion. So that's part of what I think the media is trying to get us to do. They're using an emotional baiting tactic. They want to fuel your sense of rage about the things he did. And again, I'll be the first one to tell you, highly unethical, deplorable behavior. Shame on you, Bill Cosby. But at the same time, the devil's in the details. And this is not a categorically equivalent situation to a man who openly violated a woman by forcing himself upon her. Nor, and this is the big point here, this is the critical point, even if Cosby was like the sickest and most twisted rapist to ever walk the earth, his statements about the attacks in the Black community would be untouched. His statements about the Black community would have no bearing on his behavior. And this is the painting everything with the same brush type of mentality that the cabal want us to have. They want us to assume that because somebody did something bad here, then everything they've ever done, as I said, should be treated with disgust and revulsion, and we should just discount everything they said. And for the most part, this is what people tend to believe. So, destruction of an ideology. Cosby's ideological position of supporting the Black community with family values media, while at the same time calling out the deleteriousness of the thug life culture, placed Cosby in a position of going against the ruling ideologues of the radical left, which supported Black Lives Matter, critical race theory, and the Marxist agenda. The Marxist agenda works hand in glove with the Black Lives Matter, critical race theory agenda, which Cosby in substance spoke out against. But after having thoroughly discredited Cosby, all his views and opinions on the matter were also discredited. Whether or not this was coordinated by all parties involved, the bottom line is that the socialist, communist, Marxist, BLM, CRT agenda was protected as a result of the media and prosecution's actions against Cosby. So regardless of the outcome, an operation was successful. The Supreme Court decision in no way impedes the success of the operation to discredit Cosby, so as to ensure the Black community and others do not listen to him, and in doing so, the Marxist agenda targeting the Black community can continue on unimpeded. The fact is, Cosby's ideological warnings against the trappings of thug life culture rest on his social credibility and as an upstanding member of society and the Black community. His statements rest on the basis of moral superiority, and the thug life culture is immoral and harms the Black community. As such, since most people believe Cosby to be an immoral man, they will discount his criticisms of thug life Black culture, despite the fact his statements are, in fact, valid and true. So there you have it, everybody. There's, in the final analysis, just to conclude, I think, again, that Bill Cosby did a lot of indecent, immoral, and, deplorable behavior. Whether or not it's any worse than some of the things we see happening in bars across the country, I'm not sure. Not to say that, we should just overlook it. Of course not. But the bottom line is that his crimes weren't as serious as the media is leading us to believe. And the true damage of the situation is that a good message of restoring family values and truly objectively beneficial values in the Black community that he was spearheading has been marginalized now. So that's all something to consider. So, all right. Well, went a little longer than I was anticipating. Surprise, surprise there. So now we're going to go ahead and switch to the private version of this chat. So if you're in the Zoom room, I'll go ahead and switch over here in a moment. Before I do, I just want to remind everybody on YouTube that you can go and check the description of the video, go to Subscribestar, sign up for $3 a month, and you can get access to the notes, the extended version of this that we're about to go into, and all of that fun stuff. For all of my YouTube watchers, thanks so much for watching. Really appreciate it. Stay vigilant and let the truth reign forever in your hearts. And I'll see you on the next one. Okay, everybody.